Hey everyone, welcome back. Issue 420 of the Hulk, which centers around Jim Wilson, who is the nephew of Sam Wilson, would you believe, the aka the Falcon. And Jim Wilson also happens to be a friend of Bruce Banner, the Hulk, which is something I discovered in this issue. Apparently, there's a history of Jim Wilson. He was an established character going back many years before, and he was revised for this particular issue. But it's a sad revision because in this story, Jim Wilson is seen at the start demonstrating outside of a college in favor of a student who has AIDS, and the college is basically saying that the student can't be allowed to study because of his condition, and Jim Wilson is advocating for that student to continue studying. During the process of the demonstration, Jim gets attacked by someone or the other, and the Hulk intervenes and comes and picks up Jim, who's been attacked pretty badly, and he takes him over to the Pantheon to get him treated. And whilst there, it's discovered that Jim himself has full blown AIDS and is on a pretty sort of like latter stage of the disease. So things are not good. Now, there's an experimental treatment that the Pantheon is developing, but they can't utilize it. It's not moral to do so because the side effects are uncertain and they haven't been able to get to that stage where they can actually use it on human subjects. And so that's a no go. However, it gets interesting when Jim basically proposes to the Hulk that some of his blood should be shared. Some of the Hulk's blood should be shared with Jim, so that the healing properties of the Hulk can be transferred over to Jim, and thereby perhaps curing Jim. Now the Hulk, to everyone's shock and horror, says no. And the reason that he gives for refusing Jim's request is that it's too unpredictable. There's too many unknown variables. You don't know what's going to happen. But then Jim reminds him that his own cousin, the She Hulk, came about through a transfusion of the Hulk's blood. If it was okay back then, why isn't it okay now? Why did the Hulk choose to help his cousin, but he's not helping to choose Jim when Jim is such a good close friend of his? And Bruce, the Hulk, he doesn't really go into the firm reasoning for that. He just says that, look, please don't make me decide, don't make me choose, don't this is a very tough, difficult decision, etc., etc. And it gets to the stage where Jim is practically begging him for his life, but the Hulk doesn't budge. Now, I can understand why the writer would take this approach, because if he doesn't, then basically he's opening up an entire can of worms. And the question has to be asked that if the Hulk has this immunity and he has this invulnerability and his blood is so potent, why hasn't he already shared it with the rest of the world? I mean, he's a doctor, right? I don't know if he was a doctor of medicine or a doctor of something else, but anyway, the point is, he's a man who cares supposedly, right? He goes off to have cosmic battles to save the planet, and he's fighting all these villains because he genuinely cares about the lives of other people. But if you do care so much about the lives of other people, why not give of yourself? Like ultimately, why don't you literally give of yourself? Give a blood sample, let people experiment and try and find a cure for so many currently incurable diseases. It is a question. It's a very valid question. And I think that the writer is a very brave writer for bringing up this topic in the comic books, this topic of AIDS. And this particular storyline, when someone is asking for the Hulk's blood, it's a very brave move because there are so many inconsistencies that the writer must have known would be picked up by comic fans and geeks like myself and perhaps some of the people who are listening in right now. Because when I read this, I also thought the same thing, that you could potentially save this man's life by giving your blood, and you have past history where with Jennifer Walters, she was in full control of the Hulk. There was no berserker rage. There were no issues with that transformation. In fact, Bruce is smart enough to know that the reason why he had so many issues with the alter ego version of the Hulk was because of his own childhood trauma. He knows all of this, and yet he still refuses to give his blood to save the life of his friend. Um, it's a tough read. It's a tough read. The story gets even more sad as it progresses because the Hulk, realizing that his friend is in a very bad emotional state, he doesn't want to see him suffer. At the same time, he doesn't want to give his blood, and so he lies about the fact that he will replace his blood with a placebo. So Jim thinks that he's getting the Hulk's blood when actually he's not. But Jim is a wild old a wise old hat, and he knows that it isn't the Hulk's blood that's pumping through him. And so he says to the doctor, "Listen, don't tell the Hulk, don't tell my friend that I know. I don't want him to feel bad." But when Jim has passed away and the doctor goes and faces the Hulk to let him know that, look, your friend's gone, the Hulk, just by the expression on the doctor's face, knows that Jim died knowing that it wasn't his blood. And that makes him feel terribly sad. He trudges off, into the sunset or wherever he goes with that weight of guilt, regret, whatever the hell it is. But therein lies the question. Therein lies the question. Why not just give him your blood? If you care so much, if you genuinely cared so much, it's the moral quandary that's faced by a number of superheroes. You're you're feeding your own ego by bashing all these supervillains left, right, and center, right? All in the name of helping people. But but the kind of the kind of help that you're giving is sometimes at best temporary because the villains that you beat, you pummel into submission, they always come back. However, if you really want to help people, why not let them experiment on your blood? Why not? Just give them a vial of your blood. Let them work on it to basically come up with a cure for cancer. I mean, the Hulk is basically immune from everything, right? So why not help society at large by doing that? Why is it always only about the fist and not about anything else? Um, I did an episode a little while ago, a video where I talked about the madness of Bruce Wayne, the Batman. He's known for wanting to cure Gotham of its criminal element, right? And so he wears this cape and a cowl and he goes and he beats up people, but it never works long term because they always keep coming back. And he knows this deep down inside. He knows this. At the same time, he's a multi-billionaire who could basically eradicate a huge level of poverty in Gotham if he wanted to, right? I mean, listen, pay off someone's mortgage, right? Help someone out, help a bunch of people out with their health insurance. You can do this on a grassroots level. You certainly can. But you don't see him doing these things. It's always putting on the cowl and the cape and going out to beat people into submission. Where is the societal help at large? I know that the Wayne Foundation apparently is involved in a whole range of philanthropic sort of enterprises, but those things never work out. They're always battered and bruised. These institutions always fall apart. Kids are always suffering. So why not take a more personal approach in how the everyman is dealt with? Tony Stark is another prime example. You're putting on an armor and you're going out facing these cosmic beings, battling for the betterment of mankind. But listen, if you really care, you're one of the richest characters in Marvel Universe. Just just help people on a grassroots level. But you never hear about these things in the comic books. You only ever see them beating people into submission, all for the betterment of their fellow men, women, children. And after a while, I suppose, if as a comic book fan, as a comic book geek, you do ask that question, don't you? That, like, how does this even make any sense? And the funny thing is that you only ask this question if you're a comic book fan. If you're a layperson, it doesn't matter. You don't care. You'll number one, you won't read comic books anyway. But if you do read comic books, it's gonna be popcorn past the time. And for people like us who grew up on comics, it becomes one of those really difficult things to understand. One of the most glaring examples of selfishness, I suppose, is how you would look at it, is with Logan, Wolverine, a man who's basically lived for over 100 years in the prime of his life. immune again to almost anything, can recover from any injury, doesn't get sick, doesn't get ill, doesn't get drunk. Um, his blood, if he felt like sharing and caring, could again, much like with the Hulk, they could, if they combine their resources, their physical resources, just think of how many people they could help around the world. I mean, it's already been shown that with Wade Wilson, Deadpool, his healing factor, which came into effect, he's not a natural mutant, of course. He inherited, right? Uh, it's basically fighting back his cancer. It won't let it progress. Um, I mean, that's all messed up, obviously, because it turned him into this grotesque sort of like freak of an individual. But the thing is, it's been proven to help people. Uh, I mean, of course, the way it turned out with Deadpool is somewhat skewed, but they don't ever think about helping people from that perspective. Um, so the moral question of superheroes, it's a tough one. It really is. I mean, you can go into this really, really deep, open an entire new sort of like, rabbit hole to sort of fall into. Where does it end? Do they ever think about anything but their own sort of like self-fulfillment of getting the trophy of the best fighter? Because at the end of the day, really, how much time do these people waste just sort of fighting amongst themselves? They quabble about everything. Um, the technology that the Asgardians have, if they want, because they're also a technological race, right? They're technological and they're magic driven. But if Thor, who happens to care about people so much that he would basically leave Asgard and come to planet Earth and just sort of like risk his life. If you care so much, why can't you sort of like do some sort of magical technological meld and again just help people try and build a utopia on earth? But it's never about that. It's always about the fight. These superheroes only ever think about the fight. And look, I'm not getting that emotional, or at least I'm trying not to, because the more I think about this, the more I think to myself, how much good can be done, but it never is. How many opportunities are wasted um, in not sort of like thinking about the real utility of these people's resources and powers. Anyhow, look, um, I still love comic books. These are just ideas that are coming into my mind. I read a particular issue and suddenly I'm bombarded. These days, I'm bombarded with all these sort of ideas that pop into my head, and then I share them with you guys. And you're kind enough to listen in and not beat me down by berating me in the comments. So that's very much appreciated. But listen, as ever, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on. And yeah, if you want, like and subscribe. Uh, Thanks again for your time, and I will catch you in the next one.